springs of divine knowledge, power, joy, life, and glory with the cosmic existence of the gods, pursued behind the symbols of the material universe into those superior planes which are hidden from the physical senses and the material mentality. The crown of this synthesis was, in the experience of the Vedic rishis, something divine, transcendent, and blissful, in whose unity the increasing soul of man and the eternal divine fullness of the cosmic Godheads meet perfectly and fulfill themselves. The Upanishads take up this crowning experience of the earlier seers and make it their starting point for a high and profound synthesis of spiritual knowledge. They draw together into a great harmony all that had been seen and experienced by the inspired and liberated knowers of the eternal throughout a great and fruitful period of spiritual seeking. The Gita starts from the Vedantic synthesis and, upon the basis of its essential ideas, builds another harmony of the three great means and powers: love, knowledge, and works, through which the soul of man can directly approach and cast itself into eternal. There is yet another, the Tantric. All the Puranic traditions, it must be remembered, draws the richness of its contents from the Tantra. There is yet another, the Tantric, which, though less subtle and spiritually profound, is even more bold and forceful than the synthesis of the Gita, for it seizes even upon the obstacles to the spiritual life and compels them to become the means for a richer spiritual conquest and enables us to embrace the whole of life in our divine scope as the Leela of the divine. And in some directions, it is more immediately rich and fruitful, for it brings forward into the foreground, along with divine knowledge, divine works, and an enriched devotion of divine love, the secrets of the Hatha and Raja yogas. The use of the body and of the mental ascesis for the opening up of the divine life on all its planes, to which the Gita gives only a passing and perfunctory attention. Moreover, it grasps at the idea of the divine perfectibility of man, possessed by the Vedic rishis, but thrown into the background by the intermediate ages, which is destined to fill so large a place in any future synthesis of human thought, experience, and aspiration.
So, very interesting para where he is describing the all the synthetic movements in India, because there have been many also which are not synthetic but exclusive movement. Okay, so he is listing. First he says Vedic, then he says Upanishads, then he says Gita, then he says the Tantras. So these are all the four synthetic movements. He is not even mentioning his own synthetic yoga. That's the last and the fifth one. So one by one, we'll see what is the synthesis that he's talking about. So there have been other syntheses, okay, and the long history of Indian thought. He has told you previously that it is the Gita. So what the Gita is, again he has mentioned, and we'll discuss that when we come to it, the third one. So the first one is we start with the Vedic synthesis of the psychological being of man in its highest flights and widest rangings of divine knowledge, power, joy, life, and glory with the cosmic existence of the gods, pursued behind the symbols of the material universe into those superior planes which are hidden from the physical sense and material mentality. Big sentence, but we'll look at the importance of each word. Okay, so first of all, the Vedic synthesis. What is the Vedic Vedas synthesizing? They are synthesizing the spirit and matter. Okay, or one phrase which is there: the heavens is our father and the earth is our mother. So this is there in the Veda, and very clearly they are saying both are different aspects and both are real and both have to be taken care of. This was the idea also in our Indian system, because all the truth of the caste system is exactly that. Okay, so all the four things you have to take into account. Even the last one, the Shudra also, the lowest of they are all to be done. Also, we have the idea of Kama, Artha, Dharma, Moksha. Okay, so all have to be taken into account. Even Kama is not to be rejected. You have to go through the experience. Then Artha, you earn your living. Okay, you make a family and earn your living. Then once you have done that and passed on, then you go to moksha. Dharma. Dharma. And then finally you come to moksha, liberation. So Sri Aurobindo says very interesting in one place. He says this concept is wonderful, but that last one is a small problem, and that is what caused the downfall of India spiritually, apparently spiritually, because moksha means running away from the physical world. Sannyasa also. You see, you have the four, the brahmacharyam, then the grihastha, then vanaprastha, and finally the sannyasa. So Sri says that sannyasa idea was the problem, which was not there in the Vedas. Okay, so that caused the downfall. There should be no running away from the physical world. In fact, the idea was so clear in India. No? Just now we discussed brahmacharyam, okay, grihastham. You have to go through the family life, okay, give proper place even to what nature has given you, sex and desire. Okay, that also has a place. We don't reject it. We have to purify it. Again, Palu's transformation. Okay, so this is what the synthesis was, a Vedic synthesis. No rejection of the physical world at all. And that is the reason why in ancient India, everything was included. We had 64 Shastras. And those Shastras included everything in the physical world. Metallurgy, astronomy, surgery, Sushruta. Okay, all these were there. That's all leading with the physical world. And metallurgy, you'll be surprised. Okay, people used to come from Arabia and other countries to make their swords, because we had mastered the idea, the techniques of metallurgy. They used to come and buy the metal to make their swords. Okay, so this is all a fact. So not only that, we have in Delhi, we have that in Qutub Minar, we have a huge pillar of iron, which does not rust. Thousands of years. So,
Ashoka pillar.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So these are the Vedic synthesis. Not only that, the 64 Shastras included even Kama Sutra. Okay. While you are at it, you learn to enjoy the sex also. So that is the first phase. That doesn't mean to say that you introduce that into spiritual life. No, it's not that. But you don't reject it. You go through the process. You don't reject the physical world. That was the Vedic synthesis. Okay. So now what's he saying? Let's look carefully at the words. We start with the Vedic synthesis of the psychological being of man in its highest flights. Okay. The highest and widest rangings of divine knowledge. Now, this is something very interesting, because Sri Aurobindo constantly speaks of height and widening. Okay, the widening is very important also, because it should include everything. Okay, science is doing widening. It is knowing more and more at a horizontal level. Okay, at the material level, it is knowing more and more. It's extending its borders horizontally. But spiritually, the ascetic and all that, they are only realizing vertically, but they are not paying any attention to the widening. Okay, we know more and more about metals, we know more about life. Okay, we know so many things. That's a widening. So you don't reject the widening also. In fact, look at the idea of widening in Sri Aurobindo. Okay, I'll just give you one example, nothing much more than that. Literature, take literature. Now, Sri Aurobindo says, what would widening be? Literature at the highest level, which Savitri represents, obviously. All the inspiration is coming from the supermind and overmind. Okay. Now, what about the widening? Sri Aurobindo says, all forms of literature should be resorted to. It should be practiced. In other words, what? Poetry, there are so many different types of poetry. Epic poetry, okay? Epic poetry, we had Ramayana and Mahabharata are the greatest epics in the world. Okay, they go to 24, to a huge number of words. Savitri also is exactly, it's an epic, 24,000 lines. Okay, the largest epic in English literature. There's nobody like that. Then what about only epics? No. What about sonnets? Small sonnets of 14 lines each. Okay. Then what about novels? You should include even novels in your idea of literature. And that's what Srivastava has done also. He has given, what about short stories? He has done short stories also. Okay. So he is examining everything. Okay. He also tried another epic, Iliad. That also is an epic. So poetry, prose, short stories. Okay. So
Dramas.
Dramas, exactly. Dramas, literature. This is the widening. Okay. So what he means by widening is horizontally widening your scope and going into every possible activity. It's an interesting idea, na? Widening at every level. There should be widening. At the spiritual level, what would be the widening? Don't exclude only the lower. Include also the lower. Don't think that Jnana Yoga is the only way. There's Bhakti Yoga also. Then there is also
Karma Yoga.
Karma Yoga. All these. This is a widening. Okay. So include everything, all experiences. Don't reject any. Don't go only vertically like spiritual exclusivists are doing, and don't go only horizontally like the scientists are doing. Include both. Okay. So that was the Vedic synthesis. Astronomy is well known now. Astronomy, okay, metallurgy, okay. We knew very well that the Earth is round. And when did the Europeans discover that? Only 500 years ago. We knew it from hundreds of it, so many years ago. And if you read the Ramayana also, there's reference to all this, okay. The roundness of the physical world and all this is there everywhere. So it was known. That's a Vedic synthesis, okay. So, and also the other words also were there for Vedic synthesis of the psychological being of man in his highest flights and widest rangings of divine knowledge, power, joy, life and glory. See, all are to be included with the cosmic existence of the gods, because they Vedas are constantly speaking of the gods. Varuna, Mitra, Aryaman, okay, all the gods and the goddesses, Ila, Saraswati, Mahi, all these are the goddesses. So they all represent, all at the overmind level, okay. They pursued behind the symbols of the material universe. The symbols of the material universe which the Veda uses is mainly sacrifice. Okay, sacrifice, and that is one symbol that they use, and the other symbol is drinking, soma wine, enjoyment. Okay, but they are symbols. So Srivastava is very clearly saying, just 1 minute, I'm getting a phone call, just 1 minute. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, we'll continue now.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, yeah, tell me.
Now, when did the Vedic period exist?
Oh, that I told you, na, India has a very bad historical sense. But what is interesting is, the other day I was also saying, nowadays with genetic coding, okay, they can discover the aging also roughly. There is what is called carbon dating. You know that, na? From the carbon dating.
And they found that Ram was born some 28,000 years ago.
Yeah, so there may be some exaggerations also. We have to take, it is not a very accurate science still, but carbon dating is a fairly good way of getting an approximate idea. So they say the Vedic period is about at least 5 to 8,000 years earlier, at least. Okay. The Harappan civilization and the Mohenjo-daro civilization, they say, is 5,000 years. Okay. And 5,000 years means 2,000 to 3,000 years before Christ even. Okay, so very, very ancient culture. So the Vedic period, we don't have exact dating, we can't say, but at least 5 to 8,000 years earlier. Okay, so just the other day I was watching also, because nowadays this, and also this Aryan theory got smashed up entirely because of the Because of the genetic coding. They have found out that all this is nonsense. The Aryan race coming from the Arctic regions and invading India, all that is bullshit. Absolutely nonsense. So now everybody has agreed that Aryan theory is rubbish. Okay. So very difficult to say, but these new methods of scientific research are appearing and it's very interesting. So they can carbon dating, then genetic coding, all these things are very interesting. They are discovering so many interesting things. Okay, so
They have said also that the landmass of India emerged first from the sea. Before it, the whole earth was covered by ocean, no water, and the
Yeah.
landmass of India came up first, according to the genetic and thing.
there are so many theories. And what is interesting is if you take the land masses, okay, you can actually like a jigsaw puzzle, you can put them together and they fit.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yes.
they fit. It not
But
only
India was originally part of Africa. And
That's
Or
right.
Africa was part of India.
So you can take it any way you want. I think it's better
No.
to say that Africa was part of India.
No, all the continents were together attached, no, and then the tectonic plates were they separated the
Exactly.
continents.
And the tectonic plates are even now they are moving. They move at
Moving,
the rate
yes.
of 1 centimeter every 100 years. Okay.
Mhm.
But that 1 centimeter every 100 years, the pressure is so great that you have earthquakes all over the world, and the Himalayas are still rising because of the pressure. And there's another thing which you may know or may not know about the tectonic plates. Okay, there's a huge fault line in California. Did you know that? It's a very interesting thing, and they are saying it is not a question of if, it's a question of when.
When?
That whole western part of California is going to sink and fall down. Okay, this is what happened in India. Okay, Dwarka, the city of Dwarka was very, it's there in all our Indian literature, but today it's at the bottom of the sea, Dwarka. Okay, so they found that it is still there. So this is the this can happen. So this what you're saying is absolutely true. All the land masses were together and like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, they fit perfectly well. So Vedic Jasmine's question about the aging, not very easy, but definitely we can say 5,000 to 8,000 years. See, even 5,000 to they are saying it could be even more. It could be even beyond 10,000 years. So that's a Vedic synthesis. All right. And the Vedic synthesis, they are using all the gods, the cosmic gods as symbols and also the symbols. And I told you two symbols mainly. They use all sorts of other symbols also. The main symbol used is the Vedic sacrifice. That is something that runs through the entire Rig Veda, sacrifice. Sacrifice doesn't mean to say only pouring ghee in a fire and sitting around and going on chanting mantras. No, that's a physical sacrifice. But it's a spiritual sacrifice. You give whatever you have to the divine. So that's why even the Gita also uses the concept of yajna, sacrifice. But there it is purely symbolic. Okay. So when Max Muller and all
Rangada,
yeah, tell
there
me.
is a difference between sacrifice and offering, no?
Yeah, it depends on what you value you give to the words, no? But sacrifice, yeah, you offer what you have, okay? And whatever you are doing, you offer. So in a sense, there is a little bit of a overlapping now of the two.
Sacrifice in the present sense is something you give unwillingly, whether an offering is you give willingly.
Okay, right. If you say that, then yeah. But even at our human level, I can offer also something a little unwillingly. So it depends.
No, then it will be called sacrifice.
Yeah. So that in the Gita, we are reading the Gita and we'll come to that. The sacrifice has to be very, very happy sacrifice. In fact, if you do it in the right way, you will see that when you are sacrificing, you get 10 times more than what you are giving away. Okay. The recompense is 10 times more, not less. Okay. So the symbol. So I told you one sacrifice. The second symbol is the Soma wine, okay? The drinking, that's a ananda, getting the ananda. And you get that from what? You get that from the aushadhaya. Aushadhaya are the plants. In the physical world also, we get our wine and our alcohol from plants. Okay? Rice, barley, grapes. So that is a symbol. But in the Vedas, it means ananda. And that's why it's very interesting. We used to have the gentleman, mother's embroidery department is there, on the other side of dispensary. That house belonged to Dorisame Iyengar. Okay. And Dorisame Iyengar used to have a good deal of fun and used to say, oh, these Vedic fellows, they're all drunkards. He used to say that. Okay. So he used to explain to everybody and say, they're all drunkards. So these are symbols. Okay. So of the material universe into those superior planes which are hidden from the physical sense and material mentality. Note the word material mentality. We have discussed this many times also before. You have to have the concept of the three minds: the physical mind, the vital mind, and the pure mind. The pure mind is your rationality and reason, which looks only for knowledge. Okay, so this is what Srindra is saying. The Vedic synthesis was combining both spirit and matter, heaven and the earth. Okay, so the crown of this synthesis was, in the experience of the Vedic rishis, something divine, transcendent and blissful, in whose unity the increasing soul of man and the eternal divine fullness of the cosmic Godheads meet perfectly and fulfill themselves. This word fulfill is also another favorite of Sri Aurobindo. Everything in the physical world also has to be fulfilled. The body has a right to fulfillment. The vital has a right to fulfillment. The mind also has a right to fulfillment, not rejection. The ascetics are saying impossible to fulfill the demands of the body, impossible to fulfill the demands of the vital. Too imperfect and too perverse, can't do it. Sridhar says can be done. Okay? The Vedas also say that. Fulfillment. The word fulfillment is very often used by Sridhar. Complete satisfaction. Okay?
So here he says fulfill themselves. So the cosmic godheads also get fulfillment by unity with the divine, with the soul
Yes.
of man.
Because of God, cosmic godheads, okay, they are symbols. Okay, Varuna is a symbol of wideness. Okay, Mitra is a symbol of love. Okay, so they're all symbols of all the gods are symbols actually. They represent each thing. The impersonal aspect of everything in the physical world, there's a god representing. Okay. That's the truth of personality and impersonality. Suppose we have wind in the world, which is impersonal, but there is a wind god. Okay? Yeah. Who is the wind god? Maruta, they call them. Okay? Then water, also there is a wind god. Then there is all these god, rain, Parjanya, there is a wind god, rain god. All these are representatives of the impersonal forces. So they are symbols. Okay, so that's a Vedic. Now we come to second synthesis, the Upanishads. The Upanishads, by the way, there are 105, 6 Upanishads. There are many minor Upanishads, very beautiful. But the main Upanishads are 12 to 13. Srindra has translated his 12 Upanishads. Okay. Basically, Shankara also has mentioned also 12 to 13. Okay, so the Upanishads take up this crowning experience of the earlier seers, the Vedic seers. That's why the Upanishads are called the Vedanta. Vedanta philosophy means at the end of the Vedic period, the Upanishads came into being. Okay, as Srimati explains in the Life Divine, the Vedic there's no philosophy in the Vedas. There's only experiences. Okay, and the Upanishads are philosophy, putting spiritual truths in mental terms. That's why it becomes philosophy. You come down one notch. Okay. First of all, the highest level of knowledge is spiritual knowledge. The second level of spiritual knowledge is philosophy, mind expressions, mental expressions. And the third level of knowledge is science, knowledge through the senses. Okay, practical science. So these are the three levels which he mentions in the in the life divine. So now he is discussing Upanishads. The Upanishads take up this crowning experience of the earliest years and make it their starting point for a high and profound synthesis of spiritual knowledge. And what are the spiritual knowledge? They all the different aspects of the experiences they include. Okay, you can have the personal aspect of the divine, you can have the impersonal aspect of the divine, you can have the dynamic aspect of the divine, you can have the static aspect of the divine. All these the Upanishads mention. But the Upanishads are not clearly enunciated like it's Srinivas philosophy. They are not clearly enunciated. They are all hinted at and half-assed. Okay, that's why there are 105 Upanishads. Okay, so they give you the truths, but not in an orderly and in a very, very systematic manner. They don't. The Upanishads take up this crowning experience of earliest years and make it their starting point for a high and profound synthesis of spiritual knowledge. In fact, the Upanishads have impressed those minds in the West which are open to new ideas. Okay, Paul Deussen was a German. Then there were many others. Emerson in America also. He has even written a poem on Brahma. Okay, and they had read the Gita also. So some of them have been open to the Upanishads. In fact, one of them said that the Upanishads is the greatest scripture and it has changed my life altogether. I forget the name of that German, I forget. But they were studied in the West. Okay, so spiritual knowledge. They draw together into a great harmony all that had been seen and experienced. Note the word seen and experienced, not for mental knowledge, but experienced and seen by the inspired and liberated knowers of the eternal throughout a great and fruitful period of spiritual seeking. Between the Vedic period was a period of great spiritual seeking and finding, not only seeking. The third synthesis is the Gita. Okay, so what does Gita combine? That also we will see. We have seen what the Vedic combines, what the Upanishads combine. What does the Gita combine? It combines Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga. It also combines Vedanta and Sankhya. They are opposites, but one is dualistic and one is monotheistic. But Gita uses both for its philosophy. So it is synthetic. Okay. So it does not say only love, it does not say only knowledge, it does not say only works, although they are sometimes interpreted like that. Okay. But it is not like that. It includes all. I think Pallu, I think I told you once, na? You read the Gita itself. And Pallu sent me a very interesting thing that in Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, they are going to start the Gita, okay? So management, if you have to manage others and you have to manage businesses and you have to manage labor, how can you do that without managing yourself? So you have to become master of yourself first. So the Gita is going to be taught there. Okay? And I can tell you one thing, many of these high officials and office holders, okay, well educated, they know the Gita and many of them have read even the Upanishads. Okay? It's not at all very rare. They do know all these things. So the Gita starts from this Vedantic synthesis and upon the basis of its essential ideas builds another harmony of the three great means and powers: love, Bhakti Yoga, knowledge, Jnana Yoga, and works, Karma Yoga, through which the soul of man can directly approach and cast itself into the eternal. So the Gita is the third synthesis he is talking about. Then the fourth, there is yet another, the Tantric. Now the Tantric is very interesting because Sri Aurobindo has a definitely many things common with Tantra. Okay, and this we'll discuss. It's worth discussing the Tantric because even in the synthesis we discuss to a certain extent. But the Tantra is fantastic according to Sri Aurobindo. Let's finish the what he's saying about Tantra and we'll come back to it. There is yet another, the Tantric, and there's a footnote which Yasmin read. All the Puranic tradition, okay, all the Puranas, there are many Puranas, okay. It must be remembered draws the richness of its contents from the Tantra. Okay. So that's one thing. The Tantra, which, though less subtle and spiritually profound, now note that, okay, it is less subtle but spiritually profound. It makes very categorical statements. We will discuss that, okay, is even more bold and forceful than the synthesis of the Gita. For it seizes even upon the obstacles to the spiritual life and compels them to become the means for a richer spiritual conquest and enables us to embrace the whole of life in our divine scope as the Leela of the divine. Okay, this we'll discuss that. And in some directions, it is more immediately rich and fruitful, for it brings forward into the foreground, along with divine knowledge, divine works, and an enriched devotion of divine love, the secrets also of the Hatha Yoga, Raja Yogas, and the use of the body. The Tantra uses the body also, okay, of mental ascesis. The word ascesis means tapasya, you can say that, okay. It's a, I think its origin is Greek word, okay. So the opening of the divine life on all its planes, to which the Gita gives only a passing and perfunctory attention. There you are, okay. He is giving a hint that you can even go beyond the Gita, okay. And the Tantric goes beyond the Gita. So what is the Tantric? It is something that says there should be no rejection of anything. Okay. You should be able to go through all those things which the yogas are saying, don't go there. It's a dangerous thing. Don't go into desire, attachment, ego. Okay. Don't go into all these things. Don't go into sex. Okay. Don't go into drinking. Don't go into smoking. All these things they say. Tantra says, no. I will go into all those things and yet get not affected at all. And that's why they carry this to the extreme limit, which you may disapprove of, but they say that this is what we are doing. That is the reason why it failed also. The real Tantra failed very often. Okay, there are two types of Tantras. Okay, one is a negative Tantra, Vama Marga, and the other is the positive one, Dakshina Marga. Okay. So the Dakshina Marga Tantra is fine, no problem. But with the Vama Marga, you can find a lot of fault. They will indulge in sex, they will drink wine, and not only drink wine, but drink it through a skull. Why do they do that? Because they want to show that it is possible, the worst possible things which you say should be rejected, need not be rejected. I can remain absolutely in the action and yet not get dirty. I can be absolutely impervious to all these things. They go and sit on a dead body. Okay. They even go and eat meat, human flesh they eat. Okay. Aghoris, they are called. Even today it is there. All these things are there even today. But of course the truth is forgotten. Okay. I think those people who do that, they are not at all very educated people, and they are not, sometimes they are just beggars. Okay. But they do that. They even look for dead bodies and then they actually eat the flesh. I think it's becoming rarer and rarer in modern times, but still, these are the, so Sri Aurobindo is saying, look at the words Sri Aurobindo is using. Bold, forceful, okay, seizes upon the obstacles. Your drinking and your sex is obstacles, but it seizes upon them and spiritual life and compels them to become the means for a richer spiritual conquest. In fact, that's exactly what Sri Aurobindo is saying, that the ascetic is escaping the problems of the world and going away. So he achieves his purpose because he is avoiding the difficulties. He is taking a shortcut. But which is better? If you face the problem and conquer it, naturally you are master of the oppositions also. So it is better. So this concept, the Tantra takes to its extreme limit. It does all these things. Okay. So, to a certain extent, that was there also. This idea of samatha was there also in our idea. You should be absolutely impervious to all this. You know what Ramakrishna used to do, na? He used to do, say, teach himself samatha. He used to not to be affected by anything. That is samatha. So what he used to do, in one hand he will take mud, and the other hand he will take a few coins. Okay, taka, mati, mati, taka. Tapastaki, what is the difference? There is no difference. And he would throw both of them into the into Ganges. Okay. So he is teaching himself. Now, I'll tell you something else which he did, which you may feel a repellent support, but that is to teach himself. Okay. On one hand, he will take chandan. Okay. That is what everybody uses in India for beautification and beauty, chandan. Okay. And smear it on one hand. And the other hand, he will smear even what? You can guess. Human excreta. Okay. Tapataki. So, both are matter. So this is how you develop the complete imperviousness to everything in the physical world. And Tantra does that to the extreme limit. Okay. So now I told you that there is a resemblance between Tantra and Swayambhus. What are the three things which are common to both? One, non-rejection of the physical world. But Swayambhu does not go so far as to say you don't need to do all this, you don't need to drink and you don't need to. But the Tantrics say, even that I will do. Okay, so it's very bold. But it can go wrong very easily. Okay, so that's the first. Non-rejection of physical world. Second, Ananda is the aim of life. Not like the ascetic is saying only knowledge is the aim of life. No. Ananda is the aim of life. But pure Ananda, not vital Ananda, not dirty Ananda. Okay. And the third, the worship of the Divine Mother, the aspect of the Shakti. I will not go only through consciousness. I will not go only through Purusha like the others are doing. Most of the Indian systems are only going towards Prakriti, Purusha, sorry. Prakriti they reject. But Tantra says no. Shakti also is an aspect of the Divine Mother. And that's why they worship the Kali. Okay. So that is, these three things are common to both Swayambhu's yoga as well as Tantra. So that also is a synthesis. Okay, so I'll finish the paragraph. He is listing all the synthesis. He is not listing his own synthesis because that's a synthetic yoga. Okay, the synthesis of yoga. All the yogas have truths. Okay, I go to the next sentence. And also in Tantra, he is bringing in the idea of Leela. Okay, because if Ananda is the aim of life, the divine is enjoying himself in the creation of everything in the physical world. Okay, Leela. And there is a footnote for Leela also, the cosmic play. And what is the cosmic play? Creation. Creation of everything. Creation of plants, creation of animals, creation of new materials, everything going on endlessly. And in some and in some directions, it is more immediately rich and fruitful, for it brings forward into the foreground, along with divine knowledge, divine works, and an enriched devotion of divine love, the secrets also of Hatha Yoga, Raj Yoga, the use of the body, and of mental ascesis for the opening up of the divine life on all its planes, to which the Gita gives only a passing and perfunctory attention. Okay, so they are using all these things. Hatha Yoga, Raj Yoga, okay, they don't reject the body, they don't reject the Raj Yoga, they don't use the vital, they make use of the body. Okay, this is the Tantra. Mental ascesis, the opening. So Gita also will tell you later on that the Gita also says that it's possible to live in the physical world without being affected by the physical world. So that is similar to what Swayambhu is saying, but Swayambhu goes one step more. He says that Gita says the environment may be impure, but you don't get affected by it. The lotus leaf and water. Okay. There's also another, they use the image also of the duck back. You throw water on the duck back, it never becomes wet. There's an oily substance and the birds can easily flap their wings and get rid of the water. So that is also the Gita's idea. So Swayambhu is saying even that water which is surrounding you, that also can be made pure. Even the world can be, because there's evolution. So he's going one step beyond the Gita. Okay. So this is a very clear distinction between the Gita and Swayambhu's yoga. That's why he goes beyond the Gita also. The distinction is clear, no? You can, Gita is saying you can live in the physical world without being affected by its impurities. Sri Aurobindo is saying even the impurities in the physical world are going to change because there is evolution. All right? So that's why it's a synthesis. So all these are synthesis. Then we go to the next last sentence. Moreover, it grasps at the idea of the divine perfectibility of man, the Tantra, okay? Possessed by the Vedic rishis, but thrown into the background by the intermediate ages. The Vedic truths got lost in the intermediate ages, which is destined to fill so large a place in any future synthesis of human thought, experience, and aspiration. And that is exactly what Sri Aurobindo is doing. Sri Aurobindo's yoga will play a very important part. It is destined to fulfill so large a place in any future synthesis of human thought, experience, and aspiration. If you look at all the YouTube discussions on science and spirituality, you will see that this is becoming absolutely a reality today. Scientists are looking into spiritual concepts, okay, and spiritual people are not rejecting the physical world, okay. The whole thing is going towards that. So it was an interesting paragraph because he is listing what according to him is a synthesis. Number 1, Veda. Number 2, Upanishads. Number 3, Gita. Number 4, Tantra. Number 5, which he doesn't mention, synthesis of yoga. Okay. So we have only 1 minute left or 2 minutes left. So we'll have to stop here today. And next time we have 2 more small. So what he's doing, how he is developing the theme. First of all, he has told you in the first chapter how to approach the Gita. Okay. And what is its value? Its value is not in philosophy. Its value is in its practical guidance to life. Okay. You have to live the truths. That Gita has to be taken in that sense. Also, our approach to Gita should not be sectarian. We should not feel that that's the only thing in the physical world, okay, which is a scripture. It's a fantastic scripture. There is no doubt about it. One of the greatest scriptures of Karma Yoga in the world. But we should not be sectarian about it, like the others are. This is the only truth. You should not do anything else. That should not be there at all. Okay. And then he is also telling you it is synthetic. So we should approach it for guidance in our spiritual life. Then chapter 2, there are so many different. First of all, there is a divine teacher. There is Sri Krishna, who is sitting in the chariot along with Arjuna and teaching him. So that's the second chapter, the divine teacher. Who is the divine teacher? Okay. There's a big discussion on the avatarhood later on. It's a very complex phenomena of avatarhood, but we will go into that. Very interesting, very great detail here, gone into 3-4 chapters on avatarhood. Next, the disciple. Who is the disciple? Arjuna. Okay, so that's the next. So first of all, the general approach to Gita. Second, the Sri Krishna, the divine. Third, the human disciple, the Arjuna. And the fourth, Kurukshetra. What is meant by Kurukshetra? What is its symbol of? And what is its purpose? Okay. So, and the core of the teaching, and then he goes on to the Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra also is a very interesting discussion about violence, okay, and violence and war. There is a truth to it. Everybody is saying, no, war is bad, but peace is good. Sri Aurobindo says, no, that also is a divine aspect. It has become perverted, but violence and force is a divine principle. So that's what it is. This is the arrangement. We'll go one by one into each chapter and see. Okay? So,
Yes, Rangada.
Yeah, okay.
Hello.
Au revoir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Tell me.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Why is there such a big lacuna between the Vedic time and today? Because in those days, there were neither the Mughals or the British who could have destroyed our culture. So how did we ourselves destroy our Vedic period and forgot it?
Okay. I think it's a very interesting question that you're asking. And according to my understanding, okay, the upper hemisphere, God, is perfect. The lower hemisphere, all the elements of Godhead are there, but they are imperfect. So persistence and effort also is imperfect. So the nature of everything in the physical world is, remember, transience. Okay, that's the nature of the physical world, transience. In other words, nothing is permanent. So however high you go up, you will come down after a certain time in the physical world. The static condition of a realization can be there only in the higher worlds, but in the physical world, it's very difficult to do it. So there is always, yeah, there is always.
Unless you transform it.
That's right. You are right. So that's what Sridhar is trying to do. Bring the permanence of the divine into the lower. Okay. So everything in the physical world is born. It is born first. Then it grows. Then it hits a plateau. And slowly it declines. Okay. This is, and it ends in death. This is the law in the physical world. Transience, impermanence. So naturally, it's an interesting question that you're asking. But if you consider from this point of view, the principles in the physical world, transience, impermanence, however high you go, it is going to come down one day. Unless you transform it. And that's exactly what Sridhar is trying to do. Bring the permanence of the higher into the lower. Then it will be possible.
Rangada, in that sense, in the Vedic time, everyone was not a rishi. No, there were like ordinary people too.
Absolutely.
So that is the problem. That was the problem.
That's right. But that will always be there.
Yes.
That will always
Yeah, unless everyone tries to transform themselves. That is
and
the
they will transform, but at different times. No?
Yes, yes.
So this is another very interesting thing you must know. When man came into evolution, the animals did not disappear. When the animals came, the plants did not disappear. Okay. Then similarly, when this yoga, what is it? The supermind comes, man is not going to disappear. He will be there. Okay. So it's a pyramidal structure. At the lowest level, the number of pure atoms is larger than the number of animals that are there. The animals, when the plants come up, the number of, plants first, okay? Then animals. So animals are less than the plants. Then the human beings are less in number than the animals. And the Superman will be less in number than the humanity. So it's a pyramidal structure. So as it keeps going up higher and higher, it's going more toward like a pyramidal structure. So the lower things will continue to remain, but each one will be helped to go to the next level. Man will find it easier to go to supermanhood. The animal will find it easier to come to human condition. Okay, so this whole thing will be helped downward, but it will not disappear. This inconscience will remain, the plants will remain, the animals will remain, human beings will remain, but the supermental beings will come up. So that's the thing. So the fall of the Vedic period, that was bound to happen at one time. Look at the largest empires in the world, the Roman Empire, the British Empire. He said the sun never sets on the British Empire. How long did it last? Limited time. It may last even 300 years, 400 years, but it will disappear one day. Unless the roots are deeply planted inside. Like he says about the ashram, he says the roots of the ashram are planted deep in truth. So, even in the ashram, we may be saying something which may be blasphemy to many, but the conditions that were there when Mother and Shivananda were there are not there anymore. We know that at the physical level. Okay, things have deteriorated, there's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't take advantage, okay? You have to plug yourself into the atmosphere that is there everywhere. Okay? You can't use your phone unless you plug into the circuit. You can't use your iron, okay? Your iron box, okay? Unless you plug it into and use it, then the heat comes, okay? So exactly, you have to plug into it. And the plugging device is there in the ashram. You have to plug into it. You have to tune yourself into it. Then you will get the. But physically, there's a great deterioration. There's no doubt about it. That's the nature of the world. Transience, imperfection, okay, impermanence. Yes, ma'am?
You know, it
Ah.
is so very paradoxical that
Yes,
with the supramental manifestation coming on earth, but at
yes.
the same time, we have all this terrorists, ISIS and Taliban and whatnot.
That's exactly what I said just now. All these will remain. But it will not remain at the lowest, at the highest level. See, man has got intelligence. Now, does the animals have intelligence? No. So exactly in the same way, the divine perfection will be there in the Superman, but the imperfections of man will continue to remain. That's the whole thing. The transformation of matter means there will be a sampling. Matter became life with a sampling. Okay, all matter did not become life. Similarly, all animals did not become intelligent human beings. Okay. Similarly, the divine supermind will also be a sampling. Okay, this is possible in the future. It will remain as a sample. Okay. So,
Merci beaucoup.
okay.
Merci beaucoup, Rangada. Bonne
Okay.
journée.
Bonne journée, everybody. Au revoir.
Au
Have a
revoir.
nice day.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Rangada.
Au revoir.
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay. Okay. Bye.